Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
UFO stories. I didn't see a thread for it at all, so I figured I'd start one. I have a few stories from my family, especially one very recent one that happened the other night. Feel free to share your own. Before I was born, 1950s. My grandpa on my mother's side is a teenager, in Tennessee, hanging out with friends on his porch. It's like 7 or 8 p.m. The sky has gotten dark early. He's just talking when all of a sudden they see a floating disc just hovering there, as if it was watching them. Rotating. No sound. Nothing. Just ominously watching. It shoots off into the sky, never to be seen again. He's highly religious, even till the day he died. Genuinely had no belief for any of this stuff. It didn't, and never did fit into his worldview. To him, it was something that simply could not exist. As a kid, I would hear him late at night trying to rationalize it to himself and to others, trying to find Bible verses that could or might explain whatever this was. Nothing. Passed away in 2019. Went to his grave never knowing. I have 2 more stories from this, both from my sister, but the second I was around for.
Ezekiel's vision, anon.
Some context before this next one. My sister was a bit of a shithead. Got into a lot of trouble, but always stayed clean. Never really messed with drugs, but would get into a lot of fights at school. She's 13 now, fresh into the 9th grade in high school. Had taken up smoking, but never did it near the school. School catches her with my grandpa's, on my dad's side. Knife and cigs in her purse. Expelled. Parents thought it would be a good idea to send her from Michigan, where we live, to our aunt's ranch in Arizona, so she could learn to stay out of trouble. Didn't work. But in the meantime, she learned how to hold down a job and actually learned some deeper values. Little did we know, Aunt was a scumbag and was stealing her paychecks and constantly trying to get her fired. Now she's back in Michigan. Also, she got into a fight with another kid and nearly got arrested. But it generally wasn't her fault. Bad blood with Aunt ever since. So here's where our story begins. It's about 3 months into her stay in Arizona. Things are generally pretty mellow, from her working on the nearby reservation at a restaurant in Flagstaff to her helping around the ranch. They're coming back home one night from the reservation. Around 9 p.m., night fell pretty quickly. They're on a long dirt road. Generally, you're not supposed to go fast down these roads because there are tons of sharp rocks and hills. You could bust your tires up. It's late. Aunt is driving. Sister is passing out. That's when she notices it. Stars were all out. They're all gone. She looks up. Something vaguely rectangle-shaped is covering the sky and moon. I didn't know there was an eclipse today. Aunt looks up, finally noticing. Honey, that's no eclipse. An eclipse doesn't have sharp corners. There was nothing in the news tonight at all. Sister realizes the shape goes on into the distance for miles and miles. It's slow-moving, has tiny lights on the edges as an airplane would. Totally rectangular-shaped. Starts screaming, and they're now speeding home on a dirt road to the ranch. They ran inside, still seeing whatever it was. Take the dogs in, lock up the house tight, put furniture in front of the doors, turn off all the power in the house, stay the night together, huddled up and barely getting any sleep. Next morning, she received calls from neighbors and friends miles away who say they saw it nothing on the news. Everything is totally fine outside. To this day, my sister still tears up. Due to our bad blood with my aunt, who also still remembers this incident, it inclines me to believe. Aunt went off the deep end eventually after sister left, is a horrible, abusive person, and eventually lost the ranch. Basically homeless now. She hates our guts. She would have all the reason in the world to downplay it or say it never happened. yet she still corroborated it. Next story happened a few days ago. Final story, 2021. I am 26 now with a girlfriend, living at home with my sister in her 30s, her husband and her kids due to financial situation. A few days ago, girlfriend is asleep. Go to hang out with my sister and her baby to watch a movie in the living room. She's on the phone with husband, who's an over-the-road trucker, currently between New Mexico and Arizona, about to cross over into New Mexico. He's had a couple of paranormal encounters, but has always been a skeptic and never believed in any of that stuff. We're just watching TV when all of a sudden we hear him start to lose his shit and freak out. My sister is freaking out, thinking he crashed because of the sound of skidding tires that were so loud they vibrated her phone. Brother-in-law and his co-driver are losing their shit over something in the road. Evidently, what he saw was a large light in the sky streak out like a comet, hovers and lowers above the road slightly, and sits there in silence. He's losing his shit, almost crashes into another car. All of the other cars on the road are stopped, dead silence. It was green like you never saw green, and hovering there in a disc shape. It sits there for a minute and a half before zipping off again into the sky. Other drivers, only maybe 5 or 6 others on the road, slowly composed themselves, driving by each other to confirm to each other what they all saw. Sis husband explaining all of this to us over the phone as it's happening. They eventually all take off. He's on a schedule. Down the road, they see military trucks all pulled over on the side of the road. He doesn't for a second believe any of that was supernatural or alien phenomena. Thinks it was a drone test by the military, and refuses to think otherwise. Still refuses to bring it up now.
Father's always been a huge believer toward other beings and things in the universe, so naturally, I showed great interest. Happened a while ago. First time posting. Be me, just 12. Made a quick stop at the local Kroger's, about 6 p.m. when me and my father went in. Grab usuals, we were pretty poor so we couldn't get much. Thankful we can get these sweet little French rolls. Remember clearly being in Kroger's and the time just feels so peculiar, somewhat slow and fast. Hearing is kinda dull, if I remember right. Everything kinda sounded drowned out. Not many people in Kroger, separated from my dad. In toy section, being a spaz over toys. Finally find my dad. We check out and leave. Dark outside. Must have been in there 2 hours though it felt like 30 minutes. Kind of cold outside. We return to our old Nissan and start putting what groceries we could afford in the car. Take a block of cheese Dad bought just for me and start eating some of it. Dad's behind the car, just freezes, gets a pit in my chest. Dad, what's wrong? He stares at me. Anon, look at that. Looks at the dark sky. Sees nothing. I see nothing, Dad. Dad walks over to me and points to the sky. Many floating little lantern-looking things. Dad, those are probably floating lanterns. Dad opens the car door and shoves me in, saying nothing. Starts to feel noided out. Anon, lanterns don't burn green, and they would be flickering. Notices that the lanterns burn an odd colour and glow a constant glow. The parking lot is empty, and I start to get scared. Dad drives home, no words are said. Arrives home, for days after I feel sick and throw up. Dad does as well. Dad refuses to speak about it, so do I. We lived in a really small town, and if I remember properly, there weren't any holidays being celebrated. It was just a huge group of dull, dim, green lantern-looking things that didn't flicker if they had a flame, and had a very odd square circle shape. Not sure what it was still.
I worked at a children's summer camp for pretty much all of my teenage years, located in a very hilly part of upstate New York. Large, clear, grassy area down the hill by the road, in front of the camp proper. We call it the front green. A perfect view of western horizon of rolling hills, gorgeous skies, and sunsets are routine. This is late June, early July of 2015. All of the camp staff are there for an orientation week, meaning no kids. Most base time to be at camp. Walking out of the mess hall in the main lodge, out towards the front green. I was with a group of friends, but all of the staff was headed in the same direction. Important friends to note here are Q and G. G said earlier that Mars is supposed to be visible in the night sky tonight. It's about early twilight and some stars are visible. G points out what we all assume is Mars to the southwest, bright red dot, plainly visible. Keep in mind our vantage point is from the top of the hill. From there it is sitting right above the partial tree line, across the road from the front green, fairly high in the sky. We all stop and stare for a moment. Everyone recognizes it as Mars. Move on and head down to the front green. Shortly after, while we're setting up for a staff game, Q yells out to me, "Hey dude, where the hell did Mars go?" Look up towards where we saw it earlier. Q, you are a dumbass. It's behind the tree line now because we're at the bottom of the hill. Run across the front green to get an angle so that I can show him. Still not there. WTF. It was too high in the sky to have gone down below the horizon. I'm still confused when G starts hollering to me from across the field. Dude, look up. Look up. A bright red dot is zooming straight over us to the east, in our general direction, moving way faster than any aircraft I've ever seen in my entire life. Recall that we had assumed that this was a planet, being that it was stationary and appeared very far away. I assumed that it must be a satellite since it's pretty high up, but that doesn't explain it being totally still earlier and its current insane speed. It turns on a dime to the north without losing any speed. Throws my satellite guess out the window. Q, G, and I are all freaking out. Getting everyone around to notice, the red dot starts to bank around towards the west again. It's apparently descending because I begin to notice additional lights around it. It makes a sort of diamond shape with a bright red light in front, and 3 orange lights at the other points, all constant, no blinking. Slows significantly and coasts along the horizon until it disappears behind the tree line. Earlier, most of the camp staff are divided on what it actually was. Many didn't even notice until we started making a fuss about it. But plenty of people saw earlier what they thought was Mars in the sky, and saw that nothing was there anymore. People threw out theories, but nothing reasonable made sense. It was definitely some form of aircraft, though, and it didn't behave like any kind of human aircraft I've ever heard of. UFO for sure, but aliens I'm still not totally sold on, as much as I would like to be.
I've had the sheer luck of witnessing multiple in the past several years, but I'll detail the most recent and by far weirdest. On a train that goes to the airport, idling in the station, and I look out across the tracks where there is some construction being done on massive towers. Look up and see what appears to be a bag floating gently in the wind. It's folding in on itself, but continues its descent in a straight line, not blowing all over the place. Descends from what was the 100th floor to what I think would be the 7th floor. There is some scaffolding across the way from it. As it hits the 7th floor level, it moves diagonally and scans across the scaffolding. See it a little more clear now. It's not a bag, but a complete thing. Almost like a bubble, but a bubble that is shifting around in itself, if that makes any sense. After going over the scaffolding, it then goes back the way it came, literally as if retracing its steps, and back up the tower. I follow it for another minute, and as it reaches the near top, I see another bubble or bag drifting across the open sky. Then the second object emits a bright light, like a spark, and completely disappears into the air. Still follow the first object as it moves to the top of the tower and vanishes.
Be 12-year-old Gen X redneck, mid-80s. Cutting firewood with dad and dogs. Getting dark. Start hauling up wood to truck. See a bright beam of light shining down on a neighboring hilltop. Dad thinks it's a helicopter. Both stand at the truck watching. Realize no sound, no rotor noise, no animal bird sounds from the forest. Even normally vocal, noisy German shepherds just sitting, silently watching. Light starts coming toward us across the valley. Get in the truck. Dogs won't get in. The truck won't start. Get engulfed in the brightest light ever seen. Shit. Terrified.mp4. Only sound my nervous breathing. Light winks out. Try truck again. Starts. Dad, stay in the truck. Anon. Tries to call dogs. Dogs at the edge of the clearing. Won't come. Still dead silent, hesitantly wagging their tails half-mast. Dad leaves them. Drive back down to the main road. Can't leave pets.jpg. Drive back. Dogs jump in the truck. Acting completely normal now. Get home. Ask Dad what that was. Don't know, son. Keep it quiet. Years later, it finally hit me that my dad was even more scared than I was. He loved those dogs as much as I did, and the only thing that would make him abandon them, however briefly, would be sheer terror. We told my mom about it, and while Mom and I discussed it many times, my father never spoke of it again, at least not to me.
Vehicle electrics dying is such a common theme in these encounters. I always recall the shit show that happened in the villages not far from my hometown sometime in the early 2000s. It was in the newspapers. Maybe I can dig something out. One testimony I remember was a bus driver driving at night alone, and the bus died. Engine, lights, everything. Then a bright, shining apparition ran across the road, and then the electrics on the bus came back on, so the guy kept on driving. The testimony from the school kids was much more terrifying. I'll share that if anyone is interested.
I'm interested, Anon.
A group of kids going home from school in the afternoon down the state road. It was the late 90s or early 2000s in Western Croatia, when it was normal for kids to walk to and from school instead of being driven everywhere by parents. It was getting dark, probably fall or winter. As they pass through the woods, they notice a bright white light far in the trees. They go to investigate. As soon as they get behind the first line of trees, the boy who was leading in front finds himself face to face, just a couple meters from the creature. The creature is shining bright white, sort of like a grey alien kind of thing, but scarier. Large dark eyes, but no nose or mouth. Arms end up with hands that are like spheres with claws protruding from them. Feet are also spheres. As it stands, the creature is rotating with its claws, hitting and scraping the trees. The whole thing is supposedly covered in glowing white goo. It produces a combination of loud hissing and screaming sounds. The kids panic and run back on the road and keep running towards home, screaming and crying. The creature follows them, if I recall correctly, until they get close to the village. It runs by bouncing on its spherical feet, sideways, like doing jumping jacks. I can't remember all the details, and maybe I skewed some parts of the story, but some specifics, like the description of the creature and how it gave chase, stuck with me. If I find any news articles or anything, I'll post here.
Thank you. The creature sounds similar to the Pascagoula incident.
Not really, I'm reading up on it, and the only similarity is the noises. Also, I found a couple of articles and have to correct myself. It happened in 2007. I could have sworn it was earlier. The kids weren't coming home from school. They were hanging out at the bus station in the evening when they saw the light. There were 6 of them, 4 girls and 2 boys ranging from 11 to 17 years old. There are similar encounters where people misinterpret a sight of an animal or something, but people kept hearing these screeches in the woods for at least a week, and dogs were barking like crazy, so something was definitely out of the ordinary. The kids weren't making it up too, because they all had the same description of events, and were so deeply traumatized that they didn't want to sleep alone from that day onward, and all but one moved out of the place. Also, for anyone wondering, the village is called Kukuljani near Rijeka, Croatia. You probably won't find articles in English though.
Work at an egg shipping site in the Midwest. Call it the eggplant LOL. Work is slow, I clean machines. Late at night I smell like soap. Get in the car. Pitch black Aggie country, corn and wheat fields, half-hour drive home. Exhausted, save time with shortcut through cornfields. Take some time to find the path. Play my music and vibe through the grain. Feeling uneasy, the road keeps fluctuating up and down in a wave pattern. Keep going over these hills. Suddenly the car battery dies and the whole thing shuts off. Freaking out. Something big whooshes over the car. It rocks from side to side for about a minute. Nobody flies out here, especially not this late. Car turns over without issue. Back on track. Wide-eyed the whole way home, thinking about what happened. Never believed in aliens since I was a kid. When I got home, my aunt fixed the sink so I didn't have to call a plumber. Made pizza for me and my girlfriend. Feels good, man.jpg. Never tell anyone about the UFO experience, they'd think I was absolutely insane.
2009. Driving home from my cousin's house in Creedmoor, North Carolina, around 9 p.m. Getting close to the interstate entrance ramp when I notice bright lights floating near the treetops. I glance up in immediate astonishment, then back down to the street to straighten up my driving. When I reach the entrance ramp 10 seconds later, I glance back at the object. It looks like a helicopter, one large light in front and two smaller in the back side by side. The object was moving quite slowly. At that same moment, I had put my side window down, but I noticed no sound came from the object. Soon, traffic got up behind me, and I had to leave. This all took place in around 15 to 20 seconds. I have another sighting that took place a year later, I think, that has 2 photos. I'll post it soon. 2011, actually. I was watching Adult Swim in my upstairs bedroom between 10 and 11 p.m. I noticed a slow-moving light out my window. It was presumably a couple of streets away and floating above the trees. I grabbed my digital camera to get a couple of zoomed shots. Ever since my first sighting 2 years earlier, I had tried to keep a lookout for my next chance. After these 2 shots, it disappeared behind my backyard trees. Black and white version for details to be seen easier.
To start, I've seen 3 different types of UFOs in Arizona from the years 2004 to 2014. The first type I saw looked like the Phoenix lights, but they weren't in Phoenix. I live in Arizona City in my backyard with my family because they would show up almost daily. Normally, we would be in our backyard facing south, and the UFOs would show up west of us towards Tabletop Mountain over by Barry Goldwater Military Base. There would be anywhere from 7/14 of them that had a yellow color that would pop up and stay up for about an hour. The next type I saw were red balls of light that popped up at night just under the moon face south in my backyard. For about 15 minutes, this orb would pulsate, getting brighter and dimmer until finally it shot off into a beam of light. I saw one other pop up just like it about 5 to 10 minutes after the first one and do the same thing and shot off into a beam like the last one. The last one, and the craziest one, was the object with 3 light blue lights. You could make a triangle out of the lights if you drew lines from each other. I again was in my backyard facing south, and to my right, in the open desert behind an elementary school near me, I saw these 3 blue lights. It was about 200 feet in the air, so real low, moving slowly and very silently. It slowly moved towards being directly adjacent from my backyard by about 1,000 feet. So I ran through my house into the open desert. I got probably within a couple hundred feet of it, and when I did, it stopped moving completely. I could see that the shape of it was round, but couldn't make out the material it was made out of, and could see the blue lights on the bottom. I started to get scared, so I slowly walked back and heard my mom calling to me and walked towards her and told her.
I actually have a small story from when I was on a school trip to Mexico City in the 8th grade. I'll greentext this. Be me, 8th grade edgelord. Be not me. 4 teachers and 24 or so classmates. We had just gotten a room at a motel deep in the city. Safe one too, according to a classmate. The room I got was with most of my friends and an annoying kid named Derek. We were all rowdy from the drive, obviously not sleeping. The room was one with a little balcony-ish thing. Not all that large, more like an alcove with a window you can easily lean out of. Friends and Derek tire themselves out. I'm an insomniac and I haven't taken melatonin on this trip yet, so I'm wide awake. Playing on DS for a few hours, but it goes dead sometime around 3 in the morning, feck them MPEG. Put it on charge and pace around the room trying to make myself tired. Get out of breath because I was a fat ass. Sit in the alcove balcony window thing. Notice it's unusually dark out for a city. Touch the window thinking there's a curtain or something. Nope, just glass. Confusion.wav. Open it up. Suddenly there's one really bright red light outside the window. Oh shit.avi. Everything is a blur for a few minutes, but this is where the aliens come in. Wake up in a weird room. The best way I can describe it is like the back rooms of a large retail store, but everything is really shiny metal. In some kind of sleep paralysis. Laying on a metal slab, clearly not designed for a human body. Feel something get jabbed into my back. Vision starts pulsing, I feel sick. My body starts feeling floaty. Between the flashes of my vision going pitch black, I see weird figures moving around the room very spindly. Kind of like lobsters on 2 legs too, but with brown skin, shells or whatever. Eventually, sickness subsides, everything else remains. A tall, white-skinned humanoid approaches me, clicks at me incoherently, groan in response, clicks at me even more, groan again, not being able to understand it. I remember vividly I couldn't speak. I could only make groaning sounds like my vocal cords were just not being allowed to work properly. It touches my throat. I immediately began to make vocalizations, but very involuntarily I wasn't in control of my own voice box. Taps on something, kind of like a clipboard but not made of wood at all, looked more like glass. Clicks again. Walks off. Vision starts pulsating even harder, can barely see anything. Feels like the world is running at 15 frames per second. Feel something tightly grip my sides. Try to scream, frozen. Immediately, like a smash cut, suddenly I'm sitting in my bed at the hotel room screaming. Not like I just started screaming, but I was mid-scream. Finn.
Be me, hanging out with wife and friend by the river bars in Ljubljana. It's July 25th, 2020. 23 hours, eased lockdowns, so everybody's out. Heading back home, at the Dragon's Bridge, traffic light. Wife says, "Anon, look up. What is that?" Everybody at the traffic stop looks up in awe. Two big orbs of light are shining a very bright light in random directions to their sides, at an altitude around 200 meters coming from the Castle Hill towards the railway station. Their movement is aleatory, completely silent, and they shine their light over the whole river and everything under them and sideways. The light they shine arcs in a cone, mostly to their sides. They fly next to each other, but the distance separating them is not fixed. Their movement isn't fixed either, as they move in all directions as they shine their lights. Their movement range is maybe 10.5 meters. Hard to estimate. In awe, we all stare at it for at least 1 or 2 minutes. I snap out and look at the crowd, and we're all looking. There's maybe 9 people there. Right there, I remember I have a phone, so I start recording, Pixel 2 XL. While on my bike, I cross the road to try to get ahead of the trees, but the lights are already flying high. I stopped recording to move to another area, but the buildings don't allow me to see it. When I see the lights again, 100 meters ahead by the river, a couple of guys are also in awe looking up at the lights, and we stay there, watching and ruling out what they couldn't be. The lights kept going up higher than a plane that flew by as they dimmed into space at a very high altitude.
I shared it last week after it happened on X, but time to tell it again. Scotland. My boyfriend and I are bored of quarantine. We decided to catch those Starlink satellite trains that are making headlines. Gear up for the cold, take binoculars. We find a nice dark patch in the park, enough to see something. We position ourselves and wait, looking in the direction indicated by the calculator website. Time arrives. Nothing. We wait a bit, Nada. The end of the time frame is here. Still nothing. We start looking around the night sky to see if we misplaced ourselves. Suddenly, from the position it was supposed to end the trajectory, a small object appears, dashing through the sky. Appears quite distant, like it's in polar orbit or very high up. It felt like it was following the curvature. Ask boyfriend. He takes the binocular, tells me it's just a regular satellite, turns around and looks elsewhere. I'm still captivated by the object at this point. It was going really fast. I look through the binocular bright cylindrical object. I was remembering a YouTube video where people were pointing lasers and talking to UFOs, so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try this. But in my head, to not look like a complete dumbass to my boyfriend, I asked in my mind, "Hey, are you a UFO? Can you blink?" The thing flashes quite strongly. A chill fall down my spine. I wait like 15 seconds, in complete awe of what just happened. I ask the UFO, "Can you blink again?" It blinks again. I'm in shock. I wait like 30, maybe 40 seconds. My brain starts kicking in, thinking maybe it's just reflection that happened randomly. I wait. No more blinking. For the entire wait time. Object almost at the end of the patch of sky, not affected by city lights. So I ask one last time. "Hey, can you please blink one last time to show you're not a satellite?" The object flashes double the intensity of the previous two. I thank him and wish him a nice trip. lose it to city lights, walking home with tears of joy in my eyes, feeling at peace.
Be me, driving to New Jersey from North Carolina, passing Washington, D.C. on 95, with a bro. We see a weird helicopter plane thing in the sky. It changes direction and starts coming towards us as opposed to horizontal. Turns and goes vertically diagonal. It blasts off really fast and just disappears. Bro and I immediately turned to each other and asked if the other just saw that shit. Still randomly text each other about it.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.